Hello and welcome to UPSC Preparation Simplified, an initiative by Rao's IS Study Circle. Do you know where we are today? We are in the city of gardens. Yes, many of you must have guessed it right. We are in Bangalore. Rao's IS Study Circle office in Bangalore, and today we are going to discuss with a person who is an accomplished author, a great teacher, and has tons of experience in terms of guiding civil service aspirants towards success. We have Mr. Vikram Kaushal, who is a teacher with us, and today we are going to talk about the topic that bothers you the most, the topic of ethics, integrity, and aptitude. Now, this conversation will be released in two videos. First video will focus on the aspect of ethics, and the second video will be focusing on the aspect of case studies. So, sir, welcome on board. So, we are so happy to be here. It's such a nice place, nice vibe, and this Rao's IS infrastructure in Bangalore is actually on top of the world. So, sir, when you talk about this ethics paper, GS paper 4, when we talk about this particular paper, there is an element of mystery about this paper. What UPSC want to ask, what they want to clarify, what kind of qualities they are looking for. So, can you throw some light on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, this paper of ethics has its own appeal to it, and that appeal is also actually lying in the mystery. But we do want to demystify what this paper is about. And the most essential element of that demystification is about understanding what is the intent of the examiner in putting this paper across to us. Also, as to whatever are the aspects or the qualities that the examiner tends to test through this paper, apart from the knowledge that an individual has, how are we going to effectively communicate that to the examiner? So, what would constitute an effective communication? So, understanding that part is understanding a large part of what this paper is about.
Now, when we look into this paper has an element of being interdisciplinary in more ways than one. We have questions and topics from psychology, we have questions and topics from governance, we have case studies, and there are philosophical quotes as well. So, how to handle this interdisciplinary nature of this particular subject? Because this brings a lot of problem for the students. They cannot understand what to study, where to focus, and where to focus even more.
Absolutely. So, one of the major aspects of understanding this paper is understanding where this paper comes from. What fountain of knowledge does it draw upon? Because ethics is a whole body phenomena. And while the examiner has put this paper across to us, it is not only as to what the syllabus holds, but as to what ethics is. And both of them are overlapping realities. So, what does ethics consist of? And well, I would like to take an analogy of what I call a self-awareness onion. What I mean to say by that is that an onion reflects the layers of what ethics consists of. And often as we peel the layers of an onion to have deeper realization and self-introspection that comes with self-awareness, it brings tears to our eyes, and it is not an easy process. But that is what is needed to shape the personality of a UPSC aspirant that we need to have. And this syllabus can be understood through this analogy. So, well, on the topmost layer of this onion, hypothetical onion that we have, is what we have is this, this layer which is constituting of behaviors and conduct. And this behaviors and conduct is what is also catering to what an individual does, as well as the external part of the regulatory framework that an administration has in order to ensure that the right incentive are being put at the right places for checking and balancing behavior. This is where our syllabus deals with the governance part. The topics that pertain to these are related to topics such as the Civil Service Code of Conduct Rules, or the Code of Ethics, or the Citizens Charter, or the understanding of transparency and accountability, or of probity, and so on and so forth. So this is the top layer, and this is also the external check and balance system that an individual has to be ethical. But if we look at an individual, the conduct, the behaviors of the individual at the deeper level are part of what we call the personality and the persona of the individual. This personality and persona in the syllabus is explored through topics of psychology.
Okay.
And those topics that we have are attitude and emotional intelligence. where we get to know the essence of what a person in terms of ethics is. Now, yet still at a deeper level, when we go, we talk about values. And those values are the base of ethics. In our syllabus, that is dealt with the unit of moral thinkers and philosophers from India and the world, as well as lessons from the lives and teachings of great leaders, reformers, and administrators, and the wider set of discussions that we have on values, including the topic of aptitude and foundational values for civil services. And if we look at the syllabus like that, we can see what the essence of the idea of ethics is.
A wonderful analogy to put across the idea so clearly. Now, if I look into this aspect, this paper is rich, this paper focuses on knowledge, but at the same time, we also need to understand the perspective of UPSC. What was the intent of UPSC in putting this paper? Because we are aware of the fact that this paper is a recent addition. So why what was the reason why UPSC placed this paper and what they're trying to test?
Absolutely, that is such a good question and solves such an important part of what the student should know. And well, pre-2013, that is the year when the paper pattern was changed and ethics was introduced, the people, that is the people setting the paper, always wanted to get the right candidate. What does the right candidate consist of? What do we quantitatively break it down into the constituent parts? Well, knowledge is definitely a big aspect of this. But knowledge has to be complemented with something which is building upon that and is more than it. And what we're talking about here is administrative acumen. What that administrative acumen consists of, as the syllabus itself mentions, that we want to test the administrative acumen of the individual, consists of the personality and character qualities, but apart from that also the analytical skills, whether the individual is able to make a tree of options of decision making, understanding the merits and demerits, the costs associated with it. Also, understanding one's own value system simultaneously and being able to act in the moment with the full realization and the weight of all those consequences. Now, all of that combined together is administrative acumen. And that is our second stage of what is being tested through this paper. But then there is the third level. And that third level is the personality and the character of the individual. And what we've defined is what they're trying to test. But we also find that before 2013 and even still today, they have had the personality assessment test, the interview. And the interview precisely does that. So why add the ethics paper? And well, the story is this, that first of all, there are two aspects to this. One being the weightage that we have accorded to the person and not just the knowledge. So pre-2013, the mains marks allocation was 1200 marks. And 300 marks for the interview. So that was way lesser scope for the total weightage to the person, not just the knowledge.
Yes.
But then the second aspect is that UPSC wants standardization. Now, in the interview, depending upon the person to person, there was subjectivity in the questions that can be asked, and there is also variability. And we want the same standard to be applied to all civil service aspirants. And for that, with a 250 marks weightage, we've added the ethics paper, which provides both standardization as well as is able to weed out subjectivity to the extent possible, apart from giving it a lot of importance into the kind of candidate we want to have.
So it is basically a step in the positive direction to find people who are worthy of becoming a civil servant and giving them a preference over others, isn't it?
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct.
When we look into this paper is such a rich one, such a diverse one, such an interdisciplinary one. What is the right way or what is the pedagogy that is involved in teaching this particular subject or the paper per se?
Well, this paper, as we've mentioned before, is testing something different from what GS 1, 2 and 3 test. They test knowledge. But since here we have something of what we call an emergent property. To give you an analogical example, that hydrogen and oxygen together do not show any of the properties that water does.
Of course, very true.
While knowledge is a prerequisite for the personality, the character, the administrative acumen that an individual has, but knowledge in itself is not sufficient. It is an essential ingredient. And this paper seeks to test that. And as such, the knowledge, the pedagogy that we need to have for this paper is also different because what we're testing is different.
Of course.
So, what essentially is that pedagogy? Well, first of all, we need to have a focus on current affairs based examples.
Wonderful.
And what that current affairs based examples means is, let's look at the 2021 paper, which says that what are the top 10 essential traits or values that a civil service aspirant needs to have. And while you're going to answer that question, one part of it is obviously the theoretical understanding of what those values are and you know, writing them down, mentioning them down. Another part is the organization of it. And that organization in which the sequential order that you're going to mention is also going to reflect your own self-awareness in a directly measurable form, whether you are aware of what your own value system is and where you're clear with the priority. But apart from that, we also need to anchor the answer in specific examples from context, from the current affairs that an individual has to borrow from the Hindu, the Focus magazine, and all these varied sources that one reads. And why is that very important? That is so important because that this paper seems to have a little bit of a higher risk component, because there does not seem to be any one right correct answer, but more importantly, there's a lot of scope for communication error from what I'm trying to say in an abstract manner, in a definition. Is the same thing getting communicated effectively? And for that, I should anchor it into specific current affair context-based examples. So that's one very important thing about the pedagogy of this. Now, the second aspect to the pedagogy is the relatability of what we are studying. What that means is, especially, I would like to bring forth as to how we do it across at Rao's IAS Study Circle, which I think is fantabulous. And that is so because not only the way through our foundational syllabus, through our foundational courses, through all the, through the content that we have through our DNS and the Focus magazine and our Compass, we cover the syllabus comprehensively to the T, so that we are dotting all the I's and slashing all the T's, that we make sure of what we are covering in the syllabus. But beyond that, we focus on the right pedagogy. And what I am emphasizing upon here is the generic word we often use is discussion. And to the background of the understanding of that, let me please point out that it is often said that we need to be the right person that civil service wants, that UPSC wants to hire. What we're doing here is we're not only telling you who that right person is going to be, we are making that individual through a process of molding who that individual is that we created. How do we create it? Discussion seems to be a generic idea. However, let me put forth the context that there is this Broca's area in our brain, in the frontal cortex, which is associated with verbalizing our experiences. But more importantly, when we verbalize them, when we engage in peer learning, when we are able to absorb and able to articulate and able to compress all of that in real time, what it does is it forms new neurological connections between our axons and our synaptic synaptic valves within our brain. Basically, essentially, this very important pedagogical technique of becoming who you are comes through a graded process of fine-tuned, incremental, gradational learning and value evaluation that we do in our class. And I think that is pretty much critically the essence of the pedagogy of understanding ethics.
Wonderfully said it, sir. Now, if I look into this entire aspect, the pedagogy that we talk about, there must be some resources that we should rely in order to deepen our understanding as well. So what are the right set of resources that we should normally refer to?
Absolutely. The understanding of sources is the starting point for our whole understanding. And the foundational courses that we're doing here at Rao's, I think the syllabus is covered very beautifully there. And in order to list the elementary sources, I would say that one of the basic books that we pick up, and then that's a basic understanding. Apart from that, the Compass, the foundational material, we do that. But to go on an advanced level, considering that this is a 250 mark paper and thereby requires that much amount of diversified knowledge as well as depth of knowledge. Well, for different segments of this paper, there could be different extra sources. So for the philosopher's part, especially for the applicability of the philosopher's part, an individual, an aspirant may like to pursue this book, which is published by Michael Sandel on ethics. He's a Harvard philosopher and teacher. And gets us in the present context how philosophy is relatable, which is very important for how the questions are being asked in our paper. When we talk about the component of emotional intelligence, there is this book on working with emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman, who is the pioneer in this field. And when we're talking about social influence and persuasion, well, there is this book by Robert B. Cialdini on social influence and persuasion, who is a PhD in this, and she is the benchmark, in fact, in this whole area. When we come to this part of governance, well, we definitely, the 4th and 10th report of the ARC are absolutely the basics, which have to be covered, which is so important in so many different ways. But building upon that, we have the books of Mr. R.K. Arora on ethics and governance, and also Archana Swashilya on ethics and governance. What they do is they help us to get the perspective that definitely deepens our roots in the whole subject. I think these are extra, seemingly, but very essential sources.
Wonderfully said, sir. Now, one more thing that I would like to discuss right now is that I went through the papers of last few years, last 3, 4, 5 years actually. And I could see that there was a lot of repetition of themes. So there is a continuous question you can talk about on values, on ethics and morals, even integrity. So these type of topics get repeated very often. So what we can understand from this kind of repetition, why UPSC is making so much of a repetition as well in this particular paper?
Well, I would like to say that that we have this paper with a whole lot of diversified content, and questions do seem similar sometimes. While the themes are similar, but the questions may not be similar. In fact, understanding what the demand of the question is an art in itself.
Wonderful.
It actually is the depth of your knowledge which will help us to differentiate between the slight nuances of what actually is being asked with regards to the same themes in different years. So while the themes are repeated much more often, but that does not mean that exactly the content of the question and the answer is the same. However, I would like to point out that since the themes are being repeated, we should focus on what those themes are and be able to understand them. Because they seem to be like what we would call a low-hanging fruit. They offer us a better input-output ratio with regards to the effort investment that we are going to do in the paper. And so themes like probity and corruption, or integrity, accountability and transparency, the themes with civil services values, essential traits, the right civil services attitude, the themes of corruption, of women, empowerment, of sexual harassment, all of these themes are pretty repeated themes many years over. Obviously, the questions on emotional intelligence or attitude, which are more direct from the syllabus, apart from the quotations on thinkers, which are actually more varied. These are all repeat themes every year. And focusing on them is definitely going to be pretty beneficial to us. But I would also like to mention one more point, that this paper, as we've said, builds upon what we already know. And thereby, if we put the right effort in GS paper 1, 2, 3, and in other areas of our general awareness and knowledge and current affairs, and we worked on that, so we can kind of get another additional 20 to 30 bonus marks if we are able to present effectively, write aptly, because here we find that topics of land acquisition or caste issues or women empowerment or general topics dealing with environment, ecology, climate change are also the basic content matter of a lot of case studies as well as other questions. And thereby, going through them can definitely get us some brownie points there in terms of marks, maybe 20 to 30 marks more for a better understanding of GS 1 to 3. And I think that's pretty cool.
That's actually a defining element as well, because 20-30 marks scored here is actually going to count very well in terms of rank as well.
Absolutely.
So, sir, thank you very much for sharing all this wisdom. I hope that now students have more clarity about how to handle this paper. All those people who are on the other side of screen. Now, this was part 1. We'll be releasing part 2 soon as well, which talks about how to handle case studies. And we know that case studies is something which is like more of an Achilles heel for you as well. In this context, Vikram Kaushal sir will be actually discussing how to handle case studies, how to actually define various types of scenarios, and how to make the best use out of it. Now, this is a series that Rao's IS brings to you so that you have enough clarity to clear the UPS examination. And we actually are simplifying your journey. So we want your engagement in a continuous fashion. If you want more videos, stay tuned, subscribe our channel, and see you in the next video. Take care.